Hello, and welcome to the Power of Three podcast. I'm Kenny Smith, and today's episode is a change from the scheduled book we had planned, as we felt it was appropriate to celebrate a book written by Justin Richards, who passed away recently after a long illness. Justin is someone who played a huge part in keeping Doctor Who going during the wilderness years, as a writer, having started with Theatre of War with Virgin Books, and later, of course, as range editor with BBC Books, and in particular, he had a guiding hand with the 8th Doctor novels after the burning. He also wrote a number of non-fiction titles as well, including The Legacy, which was released as part of the 40th anniversary celebrations. In addition, Justin also wrote a large number of Big Finish audios, including the first 6th Doctor release, Whispers of Terror, which was a story that could only be achieved in audio. And although I'm not meant to, I'm going to admit this is a personal favourite of mine, and I don't mind admitting it. Justin was also script editor on the brilliant Jago and Lightfoot series, which is a must if you enjoy Henry and George from The Talons of Wang Chiang. Justin also wrote a number of original titles that weren't just Doctor Who, including the Invisible Detective range of books, which my daughter read when she was younger, and also remember seeing them advertised on TV, and remember thinking, oh, Justin Richards, I know exactly who he is. We'll be bringing you a full tribute to Justin very soon, which has the family's blessing, and they've been very supportive of the book episodes we've done to date about Justin's work, with his son Julian providing regular insights into his dad's work by going through things he could find in his old files. So, it seems right to acknowledge Justin Richards' contribution to Doctor Who literature today by looking at Plague of the Cybermen, which was the 51st novel in the BBC new series Adventures range, and it featured the 11th Doctor. It was published on the 8th of April 2013 with a cover by Lee Binding. It was published alongside The Dalek Generation by Nick Briggs and Shroud of Sorrow, which was written by the late Tommy Dombavand. This novel was released as an audiobook on the 11th of April 2013, just 3 days after the release of the physical book, and it was complete and unabridged from BBC Audio, where it was read by David Warner, the brilliant David Warner, and Cybermen voices were provided by Nick Briggs. And TARDIS fandom notes, it was the first full-length BBC novel of the revived era to pit the Doctor against the Cybermen, although they had featured in print in the 2007 Quick Reads novella Made of Steel, as well as numerous short stories. Their last full appearance in a standard novel had been Illegal Alien back in 1997, written by Mike Tucker and Robert Perry. So let's take a look at the cover. We've got Matt Smith there with his arms folded, wearing his Willy Wonka costume but without the jacket, so he's got a very serious look in his face. There is a Cybus type Cyberman, although it does have the Cybus logo covered over and replaced. And there's a hand, a cyber hand bursting out of the ground like a grave, and there's a church tower, and we can also see a planet as well. It's all set against a dark background, that format that was used for the final 3 Matt Smith books. And yeah, it's quite a sharp cover, looks really nice. What does the back cover say? Well, when the Doctor arrives in the 19th century village of Klimptonberg, he discovers the residents suffering from some kind of plague, a wasting disease. The victims face a horrible death, and what's worse, the dead seem to be leaving their graves. The plague warriors have returned. The Doctor is confident he knows what's really happening. He understands where the dead go, and he's sure the plague warriors are just a myth. But as some of the Doctor's oldest and most terrible enemies start to awaken, he realises that maybe, just maybe, he's misjudged the situation. So before we continue, let's have an extract from the audiobook version, which was read by David Warner.
"We could dismantle the equipment in the church tower," the doctor said as he descended the stairs with ease, "assuming we could get past the cyber guard and its mate." "Its mate? You mean like animals take a mate?" "No, animal definitely, but more of a pet. And that makes things tricky. Probably just one Cyberman left awake to sort things out. That'd be the efficient way to do it, and they're nothing if not efficient are the Cybermen." "And what is this one lonely Cyberman doing?" "Slowly drawing off power to keep the ship alive. There may be others held in suspended animation, hibernating, asleep, preserving power and resources." "Others? How many?" "Oh, not many. Just 1 or 3, whatever survived the crash." Olga jumped down yet another step. She shivered. After the stifling tunnels, it seemed cold down here. "You say they are asleep, hibernating. Hibernating animals are revived by the warmth of the new spring. What if they wake up? Not likely. They're drawing power from the storms, and like I said, it's not natural. They're seeding the atmosphere to create the storms, but without a power converter, it's very inefficient. They're just using induction. Most of the energy gets lost again." "If you say so." "Oh, yes, I do. This is me, here and now, saying it. I saw what's in the church, and the tail end of this ship where Drettel and Worm was scavenging was shattered. That's where the power converter would be if they had one. So the plague warriors will not wake." "That definitely won't happen," the doctor said confidently, "because, for another thing, I saw broken bits of power converter on the watchman's workbench." Finally, they had reached the bottom of the steps. "What's this place? Are we still within the ship from the sky?" Olga's voice echoed. The chamber was obviously large. "It's freezing." She held up her lamp. "I can see my own breath, look." Olga breathed out heavily by way of demonstration. "Probably because there's no power and the heating's all switched off. It's below minimal lighting too, but since we're not worried about wasting the energy that the Cybermen think they're saving for their resurrection," the doctor set down his lamp on the floor and strode into the red darkness. There was a thunk as he threw a switch. "Let there be light." Enormous lights flickered on high above them. At floor level too, lamps burst into white brilliance. The polished silver walls reflected the light again, and after the near darkness it was so dazzling that for a while Olga could see nothing. She heard the doctor's gasp before she could see what he was looking at. She blinked quickly, and gradually her vision cleared, and she could look into the bright light. The chamber they were in was huge, as large as her father had described the cathedral at Drettenberg, and as tall. The far wall rose high above them. A structure of metal walkways and gantries similar to the ones Olga and the doctor had already traversed crisscrossed the wall. It took Olga a moment to work out its purpose, and then she realized that the walkways connected to steps cut into the metal framework at either end of the wall, so that the whole upright beam formed an enormous ladder. Arranged along each walkway were hexagonal doorways, a honeycomb of tessellated cells. They looked tiny at the top of the wall, but closer to ground level, Olga could see how large they really were. Each doorway was covered with a translucent membrane dusted with frost, like a thin layer of ice across the surface of a pond. "I told you it was cold," she said, putting her lamp down on the floor beside the doctor's. But the doctor didn't answer. He was staring in horror at the structure. "What is it, Doctor?" Olga asked. "Are these storehouses of some sort? To preserve things the plague warriors may need on their voyage through the sky?" "Sort of." The doctor's voice was a husky whisper. "Certainly storage. This is a colonization ship. They spend the journey inside those cells, frozen into immobility, preserving their power, conserving energy and resources, one inside each compartment. Dozens of them. Olga shivered, and not just from the cold. Dozens of what? Cybermen.
So there we go. That is an official BBC audiobooks extract, and thanks to them for their permission to use it. You can still buy this as a separate release on its own. However, if you're looking for a bit more value for money, you can get it as part of Doctor Who, the 11th Doctor Novels, Volume 4, which is an unabridged BBC audiobook that was released on the 6th of February last year. This 20-hour, 35-minute audiobook collects 4 original novel adaptations and is read by a full cast including Michael Maloney, Alex Kingston, Niamh McIntosh, David Warner and Nick Briggs. So what's included in this one? Well, we've got The Silent Stars Go By Dan Abnett, Dark Horizons by J.T. Colgan, Plague of the Cybermen by Justin, and also The Angel's Kiss by Justin Richards, which is a Melody Malone mystery. Additional notes: in Plague of the Cybermen by Justin Richards, the Doctor discovers the residents of 19th century Clintonburg suffering from a wasting disease. Even worse, some of his oldest and most terrible enemies are starting to awaken. There we go. So yes, I have re-listened to it. I did the audiobook for convenience when I was out and about during my morning walks, and my goodness, there's something very prescient about so much of this book. Strange enough, Nightmare in Silver, which also features Cybermen in castles and old world type settings, was broadcast 3 days after this book was released. That was broadcast on the 11th of May 2013, and there's also a real feel of State of Decay about it, with a primitive world but a technological secret hidden away, buried underground. And talking of being buried underground, we get the Doctor exploring their crashed spaceship, and inside, underneath, the Doctor discovers there's a tomb which he was not expecting, and there's plenty of references back to that Troughton classic. And also there's some brilliant capturing of Matt Smith's characters, and I'll just quote a quick line for you here. I like church towers. Church towers are cool, especially this one. Drafty and cold with the top missing. And of course that's slightly prescient given how the Doctor would later regenerate on top of the church as the Daleks attack the town of Christmas. And of course the news of Matt's departure was announced on the 1st of June 2013, so within a month of this book being published. So let's move on and hear a little bit more about the story. This was previewed in Doctor Who magazine issue 459 when Justin spoke about it with writer David Darlington, and courtesy of our friend Craig Brawley, he's read it out for us.
The author of Plague of the Cybermen is Justin Richards, who is also the commissioning editor of the Doctor Who novel range. There's going to be loads of specifically anniversary-related material out there this year for those who want it, says Richards. So we decided to keep these novels straightforward and standalone. But having said that, it is the 50th anniversary year, so we decided to acknowledge that by going for the Daleks and the Cybermen. We don't want to do all monsters, so for the third book, what better homage and nod to the programme's origins than a story set at the time it started in the aftermath of President John F. Kennedy's assassination. What of Richard's own novel? The current Cybermen are more of a threatening presence than a monster, silent and deadly. But actually, the Cybermen I remember from my childhood were the same. It was only really in the 5th Doctor's era, and beyond that they became more talkative villains rather than a force of nature lurking in the shadows. Look at the Tomb of the Cybermen. We don't actually see a genuine Cyberman until the end of episode 2. Plague of the Cybermen is similar in how it portrays them. That's not just a reflection of how the Cybermen are depicted today, but how they originally were, and how I think they work best and most effectively as monsters. They are creatures of the shadows and the darker places of the imagination.
And huge thanks to David Darlington for letting us quote that. So let's move on and have a second extract from the audiobook, and let's have a little bit more cyber action, shall we?
The open grave was the most obvious route the Cybermen might use. The doctor was convinced they would attack the village in their search for anything and anyone they could adapt to repair their ship. Klaus and old Nikolai set about shoveling the earth back into the grave. Kaplan sent the other guard back to the castle to ask Lord Earnhardt for reinforcements. "We'll need all the help we can get," the doctor told him. "It won't be much," Kaplan said. "Half a dozen lads if we're lucky. Most have never used a sword in anger. Well, they'll need to get angry soon." "You really think they'll come at us through the church or the graveyard?" Klaus asked. The doctor nodded. "Quickest route. The only other way is out through the other side of their ship and up in the field and the woods." He pointed through the persistent rain to the small wood on the other side of the church. "Where you told us not to go," Olga said. "They won't go in there for the same reason. Radiation. It affects the Cybermen too. Not in the same way as it does humans, but it upsets their systems. Messes up the intra-cybernetic communication relays so they sort of spasm and seize up." "Can we use this radiation as a weapon against them?" Kaplan asked. "It's just as deadly to us, so not really." "But maybe we could lead them into a trap," Klaus suggested. "Send them into the field and the woods or something." "It wouldn't work. The radiation is at a dangerous level there, yes, but it won't work instantly, and as soon as they realize what's going on, they'll just get out of there fast." "So what can we do?" old Nikolai demanded. "Not a lot, to be honest. Try to keep the Cybermen away from the village. Hold them back as close to the church and their ship as we can." "Is that all?" Olga asked. "It may be enough. We've got rid of their power converter, so they're back to just getting a trickle of energy from the storms. If we can hold them back long enough, make them use up enough power, then they'll have to re-energize. If they can't, then they'll return to their tombs. Wear them out, and they'll go back to sleep. Is that what you're saying, Doctor?" Kaplan asked. "Best I've got for the moment, but like I said, working on it." "It'll be dark soon," Klaus said, looking up at the cloud-heavy sky. "The men will need rest if they're going to have to fight the plague warriors again." "Someone needs to keep watch," Olga said. "You men get your beauty sleep. I'll organize some of the women to help me." "Help you?" Klaus said. "You need rest too after today." "Like I can sleep with all this going on." "Go on. You need to tell everyone what's happening and make sure they're ready." "They'll come at night," the doctor said. "They are nocturnal creatures, then?" old Nikolai asked. "No, but they'll attack when you humans are at your lowest ebb, when you're tired and your senses are at their weakest. Darkness and fatigue. That's what they'll count on." "It's good that the rain's letting up a bit, then." Nikolai pointed to the sky, where the clouds were clearing slightly. There were patches of pale blue breaking through. "It's almost a full moon tonight. With luck it won't get that dark." The moonlight struggled weakly through the clouds. The rain had eased to a drizzle, but it seeped through Olga's coat and into her clothing. She felt chilled to the bone. She was sitting on the stone wall surrounding the graveyard. It might as well have been carved from ice, the stone was so cold. But it was that or the muddy ground. Beside her, the doctor had jumped down from the wall. He stamped his feet and blew dragon's breath, as the village children called it, into the cold air. Olga had seen such things the last few days that she wondered if dragons were real too. The doctor would know, but she didn't dare to ask. She thought of Klaus, snug and warm in bed. Though more likely he was sitting in the tavern, unable to sleep, as worried about Olga as she was about the Cybermen. No, that was silly. Why would he be worried about her? Just because she worried about him didn't mean it went both ways, did it? Or did it? "It's starting," the doctor whispered close to Olga's ear. "You hear that?" She couldn't hear anything except her own teeth chattering, unless... No, he was right. There was something coming from beneath them. A rhythmic sound like someone brushing dust out of the door. She looked at the doctor, but his attention was fixed on the graveyard in front of them. Without warning, the doctor jumped back up onto the wall. He stood, balancing precariously for a moment, then jumped down again, now on the other side, so he was outside the graveyard. "I think you should join me," he told Olga. "Best to keep out of sight." She swung her legs round and over the other side of the wall before pushing herself off. The doctor caught her and gently but firmly lowered her to the ground. He put his finger to his lips and pointed back into the graveyard. At first she could see nothing. Then the moonlight increased slightly as the clouds scudded away, and Olga saw that the ground was moving. It was most obvious in the new soil packed down over Lisa's grave, but even the grass was swaying, twisting, moving. Suddenly a silver fist punched up through the ground. The hand unclenched, fingers grasping the air. Another followed, and another. All over the graveyard, metal hands and arms thrust upwards like grotesque trees erupting from the grass. Lisa's grave was alive. Soil rolled away as the whole area heaved upwards. The hands of a Cyberman pushed through and upwards. The head followed, earth and mud falling from the black eye sockets as the creature rose up, heaving itself out of the ground. "Get Klaus," the doctor said. But Olga was unable to move. She could only stare in horror as more of the Plague Warrior Cybermen pushed their way up through the ground. They hauled themselves out into the night air, metallic bodies tarnished with mud and dirt, glinting in the cold moonlight.
That seems rather familiar, doesn't it, Stephen Moffat? Again, huge thanks to BBC Audiobooks for letting us use that extract. And you can still buy this as an audio download, where it's available from Apple Books, Google Play, Hive, Kobo, Libro FM, Spotify, and the one I always like saying, Zigzag, which is zigzag but with X's instead of Z's, or Z's if you're in America. So, this book was featured in Doctor Who magazine when they reviewed it. This was reviewed in issue 461 of Doctor Who magazine by Hywel Evans. I don't know who Hywel is, but it sounds very Welsh. So let's find out how DWM reviewed it. And this has been read for us by Craig Brawley.
As Professor Quatermass would doubtless tell you, no good ever came of a crashed spaceship. However bad the crash, whatever was on board will be up and about in no time. And so it proves in Plague of the Cybermen, as a 19th century German village and crash site falls prey to radiation sickness, body snatching, and cyber-augmented wolves. Also in the mix is a scientist who has taken advantage of the crash to soup up the local gentry with salvaged cyber technology, which inevitably turns out to be one to file under just because it's clever doesn't make it right, although Justin Richards wisely avoids a lurch into Cronenberg territory. Plague is very much in the Doctor Who meets Hammer horror tradition. Thick fog, fearful villagers, nasties surfacing in the graveyard, funny business afoot at the castle. It has the companionless Doctor teaming up with schoolteacher Olga to investigate. Older, and perhaps more world-weary and reserved than the usual companion, Olga is a good foil for the Doctor's hyper-enthusiasm, although shorn of Matt Smith's delivery, the faux childlike wonder of some of his lines does rather grate on the page. Doctor Who fans who complain about too much running down tunnels might do well to get into a different show, but there is, it must be said, an awful lot of running down tunnels in the novel's middle section. However, on the whole, Plague is a story you can imagine working well on television. The echo of the Tomb of the Cybermen, when the Doctor and Olga discover a honeycomb of hibernating Cybermen, is particularly effective, and would have made for a potent scene in the Old Enemy's comeback story. Indeed, one of the best things about the novel is the way it restores the Cybermen's early menace, which has been lacking from their recent television outings. Less heartening is the discovery that the attempt to make Delete, the Cybermen's equivalent of Exterminate, has still not been abandoned, even though it was a frankly hopeless idea in the first place. Come on, Exterminate evokes some of the darkest episodes in human history. Delete evokes getting through to the IT help desk. Elements of the plot may be far from unfamiliar, and a couple of twists involving supporting characters are clearly telegraphed in advance, but the pace of the storytelling means that this matters less than it might. The momentum is maintained to the end, although in a quieter moment, Justin Richards gives us a nicely understated glimpse of the Doctor's isolation as he leaves the village. At which point, readers of the old Target novelisations will note that the wheezing, groaning sound of the dematerialising TARDIS has become a strange, scraping, grinding noise. Somehow, it's not quite the same, is it?
Thank you so much for that, Craig. Now let's pop over to Goodreads to see what the listeners think about this one, or the readers, depending on which form they've digested this book. It's got a rating of 3.69 out of 5. It's had 882 ratings and 115 reviews. Of these, 5 stars 21%, 4 stars 36%, 3 stars 34%, 2 stars 7%, 1 star 5%. Let's start with a 5-star review from Helen, and this has been read for us by Stevie Day.
I'm torn between 4 and 5 stars, but well, oh fuck it. I love this book and unapologetically give it 5 stars. To be honest, Cybermen aren't my favourite Doctor Who monsters. I don't really have a list, but I don't think they're even in my top 10. A lot of Justin Richards' Doctor Who books are, well, in my opinion, hit and miss, but damn, this book was a great read. Also, I'm hyped about the Series 12 finale, and I just needed to quench my thirst. The Doctor was amazing, but one of the things I really liked was that the companion was a middle-aged woman. I'm not saying I'm sick of young people being companions, I'm just saying seeing an old person beside the Doctor makes me really put the Doctor's own age in perspective. Olga got confused when she was called girl by the Doctor, and I was like, oh damn. Also, I enjoyed the little twists. The ending could have been a bit better, no doubt, but I've already made up my mind. This is 2020's first 5-star Doctor Who novel, and I hope for more to come my way soon. Fingers crossed.
Thank you for that. Now let's have another 5-star review, and this is from Kathy, Kaethe, I'm presuming it's Kathy, and this has been read for us by Martin Montague.
Just the thing where none of the other books lying around are tempting. First, it's a Doctor Who fix, and the author managed to give it a good Matt Smith feel. Next, it's set in a small town in Europe somewhere, sodden with rain, menaced by wolves, with a castle, so points for classic Gothic trappings. Then it's steampunk Cybermen. It manages to hit that sweet spot for action without being too violent, with amusing dialogue but seriousness of purpose. I have suddenly discovered the delights of whatever the word is for basically professionally penned fan fiction. Now I know why there are 27 billion Star Trek and Star Wars books. It's fun to hang out in these universes.
Thanks, Martin and Kathy. And here's another 5-star review. This is from Christopher Dodds. Christopher says, "It was a great read. The author did a great job with the way he had written Matt Smith's Doctor, as well as the story involving him and the Cybermen. A must-read for any Matt Smith fans." Brilliant. Okay, let's have another 4-star review, and this one has also been read for us by Stevie. And this is from Dan.
This book sees the 11th Doctor face his old enemies, the Cybermen. It's not entirely clear exactly when it's set in the Doctor Who continuity, but it sees the 11th Doctor companionless, so it's probably after the Snowman. The Doctor arrives in a 19th century village to discover the locals dying of a plague or being taken away by plague warriors, and the dead apparently walking from their graves. It's obvious from the title what the real cause of all this is, and it soon turns into a generic Cyberman story. It's certainly a good story, but it doesn't really cover any new ground. A big chunk of it was based on Tomb of the Cybermen, which is certainly no bad thing. In fact, if you're a fan of that excellent Patrick Troughton story, there are a few little treats for you in this book. As someone who's been writing Doctor Who books since the series returned in 2005, Richards has no problem in characterising the 11th Doctor. In fact, I would say this is the most accurate prose version of the 11th Doctor out of all the books starring him I have read. We have a one-off companion here named Olga, who makes a decent companion, although she's pretty much a copy of Clara. Overall, a good quick read for Doctor Who fans, but not the most innovative Doctor Who book you can find.
Cheers, Stevie. Let's have another 4-star review. This one has been read for us again by Martin, and this is from Richard.
I thought the author did an excellent job of capturing the Doctor. I could easily hear his voice speaking the lines he was given. It could easily be believed that this was an episode of the TV series. I thought there was an over-explaining of some plot points. There were also times when an explanation is explained more than once and it became repetitive. The point of view is from the temporary companion. I really enjoyed the thoughts she had, and they suited the time period. For example, initially describing the sonic screwdriver as a magic wand. The dialogue is witty and interesting. The Cybermen were well written. They fitted in with canon, but had their own twist, making this a different interpretation. The story was very good, and there were a few clever twists in this tale. The pacing is quick, and as you would expect in a Doctor Who story, there's a lot of running.
Thank you, chaps. And here's another 4-star review from Natalia. Natalia says, Richard's characterisation of the 11th Doctor feels vibrant and rings pretty true. I enjoyed it a lot. The plot was engaging. I honestly couldn't put it down. Admittedly, there were some parts I was confused about during the second half. And if you're really into the Cybermen as they're characterised in the show, you may or may not enjoy this take on them. Regardless, I'd recommend this novel to anyone who is fond of the 11th Doctor, please, Natalia, and his banter. I'd read it again, despite the fact there was some room for improvement. It was entertaining. Lovely. Now let's have a 3-star review. This is from James Kinsley, and Stevie's read this one for us.
Perfectly decent yarn, running about, and the usual Doctor Who malarkey. The 11th Doctor comes over well, Cybermen make for a good villain, and the 19th century European setting makes a nice change. Would have made a decent serial with Olga doing sterling work as a quasi-companion in the absence of any regulars. All in all, ticks all the boxes, and makes for an enjoyable read.
And our final review is another 3-star review. This is from Lauren Stoolfire. Listeners, have you ever had your stools go on fire? If so, please email Peter at theearth2podcast@gmail.com and let him know, and he'll prescribe some medical advice. Please only email when it's safe to do so, when your fire is at a manageable level. Anyway, Lauren says, Plague of the Cybermen by Justin Richards is a good story, featuring one of my favourite iterations of the Doctor. The first half was pretty great, but the second half, not as much. I wish the Doctor in this story wasn't companionless, making it probably set in the first half of Series 7, but it was cool to see him face off against the Cybermen and get up to his tricks. Yes, the chronological placing of this story is one that a few people have debated online, but I think it'd be fair to say that Clara's joined him because he's wearing the Willy Wonka costume on the cover, but she's not fully on board every week, so she goes off and does her own thing, and the Doctor then comes back, as was wont to happen. So there we go. Huge thanks to our contributors today who've helped bring the words of others to life, but of course our deepest condolences do go to the family of Justin Richards, to his wife Alison, and to his sons Julian and Chris, and of course their wider family as well, and to his friends Justin, Vale. And to leave you, we're going to go with a song by a Scottish band, and I think it's a very appropriate one to go with. The song is called Wrapped Up in Books, and it's by Belle and Sebastian. Until next time, I've been Kenny Smith. Bye-bye.
It was pretty bright up on the rainbow bridge tonight. I could see into your window, although you're far away. You were racing in a car beside a boy you just don't know if he is a fool. What you have in mind? If he is a fool, what you have in mind? Change is on the cards, but this time it will be hard. I never want to leave you, we've never had a fight. You should never split a pool, you should never split at all. I wish I had to, as I could follow. I write the ending without any sorrow. prayer just while you are sitting there, and I will wrap my arms around you.